Family. Ali, thank you so much. I have to brag on Ali a little. Uh, I brought the recordings from that conference home, and um, all my girls were like, "Oh my gosh, Ali is fabulous. Oh my gosh." I'm like, "You've got fangirls, honey, in East Tennessee." Alice, thank you so much for asking me to come. Before I get into my talk, I want to get the stats out of the way. Obviously, I said, if I didn't say it, my name's Heather Ganciano, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is April 8th, 1990. I have a sponsor. Her name is Pat Yo. I have a home group, and if you come to Knoxville, Tennessee on a Thursday night, it's the Tennessee group. We're a closed literature-based AA meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we share experience, strength, and hope based in the literature. There are people dying of alcoholism in AA because they're not in the book, and they are needing some information that is not a piss and moan meeting, but a meeting that goes to the literature and talks earnestly about what's the deal with alcoholism. But before I get into my talk, I just want you to understand the keen intellectual mind that is seated before you. We had our first anniversary Eat and Speak 6 years ago, and I invited Tim Highland to come and talk. And I was going to be one of the kitchen witches, and I decided to serve you guys pot roast. And I asked you guys to bring the side dishes and desserts. And so I wanted to keep the meat hot while I was serving it. So I went online and Googled, how do you keep your meat hot? Now I get a lot of erectile dysfunction ads, and if I want to meet a hot young chick, I'm all set. So that's the keen intellectual mind that is seated before you. And having had said that, let's get into this. I grew up in East Tennessee, right at the foot of the Smoky Mountains, you guys. And my house was that house that had the grass growing 3 feet high. You guys, I want to talk a little bit about my alcoholism before I talk about step 11, because you need to know who I am and where I come from before you're going to hear me tell you what I sought in the 11th step. And that is, I believe with everything that I am, and this is not dramatic or hyperbole, I believe had I not found alcohol and some other outside goods, I believe I would have put a gun in my mouth and blown the back of my head off, because I had no coping skills to live life on life's terms. In We Agnostics, it talks about that, how does it say it? Deep down within every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God, right? And I was raised with values as a child. Even though my mom was a single parent, I went to church. I knew right from wrong. But the minute that alcohol hit my system, honey, my shoulders went down. Even when I talk about that first drink to people, I have this Pavlovian response, and that is that my mouth begins to salivate. And, we don't talk about booze the way that normal people do. We say things like the beads of sweat glistening down the beer bottle. And we don't have to say things like, God, I'm so sorry I slept with your husband. Those things don't come up for normal people. That's the kind of person I am when I drink, right? So anyway, I'm this nervous, neurotic, uptight kid, and I have found alcohol, and I feel like I have been changed. And I decide that Knoxville's the problem. I'm not a religious person. There's all these Southern Baptists. That's how I was raised. And I'm not here to bash religion. It says, be quick to see where religious people may be right. And I know that today. But as a young burgeoning alcoholic, I wanted to run as fast as I could from Knoxville. So I packed everything I owned and ran to New York City. And New York City was going to be the thing that changes this alcoholic, because I have a God problem already. I just right out the gate, I'm struggling, I'm seeking, and I can't find. And my alcoholism begins to lay hold, you guys. And what happens is I'm like a frog in a pot of cold water where the temperature is slowly ticking up on the dial. And that frog begins to boil alive in its own juices. And that's the way my alcoholism began. It began to take over me, and it began to decide where I went and who I hung out with, and that was the way my life was to go. And I moved to New York City to study voice. I had good intentions to be a law-abiding citizen and be a good, upstanding, dignified woman. I was raised with morals, but slowly but surely alcohol began to steal every aspect of who I was and integrity. And I crossed lines so fast, it was like I was sprinting across them. I moved to New York to study voice, and I'll never forget going into that vocal coach's class and him cupping his hand around my face and pulling me toward him. And he says, you're going to come here and study music with me. He says, why would you waste my time? Why would you waste your money? And I did what we do. I never went back. I went home and pulled the vodka out of the freezer and had another drink. and there's no God and there's no help, and AA is not even a thought in my mind. So I decided I hated Knoxville. I ran to New York, and then I decided I hated New York, and then I ran to LA because LA was going to fix me. And my life is getting smaller and smaller. And I ended up working at a dive bar in the corner of Lincoln and Manchester, you guys. And my alcoholism, like that frog in the pot of water, is consuming me. I want to share one of my last drunks and then want to get sober, and I want to talk about God with you. I'd been on the beach all day, and a friend of mine was working at the Sidewalk Cafe in Venice. And the reason I share this story with you is, in hindsight, it was my first God moment that I realized. I had been on the beach drinking all day. I came into the bar waiting for my friend to finish his shift, and I sat down at the bar, and 3 men offered to buy me a drink. And what happened was I was so drunk, as I always am at this point in my drinking career, that I didn't realize that the bartender didn't give me the drink, that these guys had given me the drink. And what happened in no short order is I was drugged and abducted and taken to this dive motel down in Venice, California. And this is Venice in the 80s, when it was still a lot of shooting galleries and it was rough. And I'm sitting on the edge of the bed in this motel, and I think, oh my God, I'm in trouble. I'm a nice girl from Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm in a room with 3 men. And I knew I was going to be raped and possibly murdered. And you guys, that moment of clarity that I had was overwhelming. I was in and out of lucidity, and a voice as clearly as I'm speaking to you said, get up and run. And I heard that voice in my head, and when nobody was looking, I ran out of the room. And I don't know if you've ever had one of those feelings where your feet are like in quicksand, and when you're a dream and I'm stumbling and I'm running and I'm being chased by these men. And all of a sudden I look down the road and 2 men are standing off in the distance. And one man pulls up in the van. He says, get in the van. I'll take you home. He said, I didn't know they drugged you. And like that voice conscious, that God conscience deep down inside of me, I looked at that guy and I got in the van and he took me home. And horrible, terrible things were happening now when I drink. And I remember having a strange sense of peace of knowing one day that they would find my body in a field and I'd be dead and it would all be over, because I was so tired of drinking and doing the things that I had to do to be able to drink the way that I wanted to. And the next day, my coworker at the bar that I was working at, who happened to be my best friend and my cocaine dealer, which is what you want in a good friend, she called me and said, hey, listen, I heard what happened. I'm going to go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Do you want to go with me? And yes, you heard me right. My cocaine dealer 12-stepped me into Alcoholics Anonymous. You cannot make this stuff up. Anyway, I end up in AA in 1987, and I came into Alcoholics Anonymous as willing as the dying could be. You know, I got a sponsor. I had 7 commitments a week. I was doing everything you asked except for 2 things right up front that I noticed, and then one thing later, and that is this. I would have given you my last dime, but I didn't know how to ask you for one or to ask you for help. And everybody in AA knew a little bit about me, but there wasn't one person that knew absolutely everything about me. And if you're new, that's pride masking itself as humility. But I thought I was being gracious and humble. And what I was doing was letting my ego and pride intercede and keep me from connecting with you. The other problem I had was with God. I find it ironic that when I'm asked to speak a lot now, it's on 2, 3, and 11. My sponsor says, what are you speaking on tonight? I said 11. She goes, God had such a great sense of humor, because I was struggling with God my whole journey until a series of events occurred. So I came into AA in 1987, and I don't want to have a relationship with God. So I made the meeting my higher power. I had heard of atheists doing doorknobs in the group, so I thought, I'm going to do that. But then I'm a very smart, clever alcoholic. I started to watch people in the meetings, and I go, wow, she's cheating with her, this guy on the 3rd row. She's cheating on her husband with that guy. And then I go, oh my gosh, that guy just said outside that he's lying on his taxes so he can get extra money back. And I start to get a resentment against the people that are supposed to be my higher power. And I decide that God is not big enough for me. So I call my sponsor. I'm playing in a club in Ojai, California, and I tell her, I don't think I'm an alcoholic anymore. And she said, good for you. And I said, don't you want to ask me to stay? She says, honey, if you don't want to be here, we don't want you here. It's for people who want it, not for people who need it. And thank God she didn't promote AA, because had she done that, I would have run screaming and never come back. But I did come back. I came back April 8th, 1990. I was as willing as the dying could be, my friends. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and Ollie would say, "Hey, Heather, how are you?" And I'd vomit every feeling, thought, and emotion all over him. He'd glaze over, and I'd go over to Sunny, and I would share everything. So everybody knew everything about me. And so I started to get that relief and that ease that they talk about. But then the God thing came up again, and I'm in trouble. And you guys, I got sober in a place called the Marina Center. Their motto was where the debris meets the sea. You had guys that were lawyers and judges sitting next to urine-soaked homeless people. It was fabulous, you know, and there was AA was on fire. And so I grew up around people like Clancy Imlislin, and Dr. Paul O was a regular fixture at my meeting. And his stories in the big book, Dr. Alcoholic Addict, and his wife, Max, and their two Ala dogs were there all the time. Loved him. Magnificent, magnifying alcoholic mind, he would say. And then there was this guy named Howard P. And I want to tell you about Howard P. because Howard P. absolutely saved my life. And if you've never heard him, please go listen to his tapes. Howard told this story one day about baby elephant ideas. And I leaned in so hard, I almost fell over. He told the story, and I can share it with you because Howard has since passed. But he said the trainers in circuses would take these baby elephants and they would put these large linked chains around 1 foot. And then they'd take a tiny stake, he said, and they would tamp it into the ground. And he said that baby elephant would pull and pull and pull and couldn't break free. And eventually it stopped struggling. He said, and then fast forward, this baby elephant is 3 tons, enormous behemoth of an animal. And he says, and he's got that same chain link around his foot and that tiny little stake stuck in the ground. And clearly this huge behemoth of a beast could pull it out without any effort and walk on, but it never tried because it had learned when it was a baby that it couldn't break free. And when he said that, my heart burst open because I realized that I had a lot of baby elephant ideas about God, and I had to be willing to change those ideas and think about something bigger. And right shortly after that, this woman came to talk, and her name was Franny S. And Franny was loud and obnoxious and over the top. And she would say, "I'm a child of God, I mean to tell you." And she would tell these stories. And in her shares, you guys, I'm laughing so hard that I almost feel like I'm having an out-of-body experience. You remember that speaker that you heard when you were new? And you said to them, "Oh my gosh, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. She's so funny." And then the next minute she would tell a story and you'd be sobbing and sobbing. And again, my heart cracked open a little further and the sunlight got in. I remember this old timer said, "Heather," he said, "you look like in the scene in the movie Moses where Charlton Heston would part the Red Sea." He said, "Every time you walked into a meeting, it looked like that scene." He said, "because you were so angry, they would see you coming and people would move to the sides of the room so that you wouldn't be in their path." And he was right. I was dying of alcoholism and sobriety because I hadn't surrendered to a power greater than myself. But because of baby elephant ideas, it gave me hope. And it allowed me to pick up the key of willingness and make that decision to turn it over to God. And so life went on and I had this amazing life. I grew up in AA. I came in the first time I was 21 in 1987. I made it back at 25 when I was 1990. And I, give or take a month, I got a husband, I had 2 kids, my life became full. And I decided I wanted to come back to Knoxville. And if you're new and you're like, "Wait, I thought you hated Knoxville," you're absolutely right. I hated Knoxville and I ran to New York, and then I hated New York and I ran to LA. And then when I got to LA, I hated LA. And what happened was I got sober and I realized I didn't hate those places. I hated me. And when I did the work 1 through 12, I wanted to come home. And so I came back to Knoxville, Tennessee, my husband and I and our kids. My mother-in-law moved from Florida. My children and my father-in-law moved from California. So my whole family is now in Knoxville. And let me tell you, my mother-in-law is one of the original Playboy bunnies from the Chicago Playboy Club. My mom is a hardcore Southern Baptist. Holidays are interesting in our house. My mom said, "If I had a swear jar for every time your mother-in-law said the F word, I could send a family of 4 on a mission trip for a year." I'm like, "Mom, dial it down." My father-in-law that had moved from California, I want to tell you about this man. He and I had a very tenuous relationship. He was a classic, what was called a malignant narcissist is the diagnosis. He had been married and divorced 9 times. He had 5 DUIs. He was an untreated dry drunk. And he and I had a very difficult relationship. When he was in his full disease, he beat my husband when my husband was a year old, so bad that my mother-in-law said it left belt buckle marks on his back for weeks. And my husband has no recollection of that. But this man was not even allowed to be alone with my children. And when he moved to Knoxville, he became ill very quickly. And he was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. And the reason I share this story with you is because I was so angry that he showed up in Knoxville so that I could take care of him when he died. I called my sponsor, Pat Y. And I said, Pat, can you believe this man showed up here so I could be his caregiver as he's dying? She said, well, be that as it may, he is doing it. You are doing it. That's what we do in AA. We suit up and show up. And I said, Pat, I will do it because I was raised right in Alcoholics Anonymous. I will do it for AA's sake, and I will do it for my husband's sake, so that when his father dies, he has a sense of peace that his father was well cared for. You guys, I did what we do in AA. I suited up and showed up. I got durable power of attorney. I was the executrix of his estate. I got him exemplary medical care. Everything he could have ever wanted, he was given. And if you would ask me, Heather, why are you doing this? All along, everybody would ask me, I'd say, because AA taught me how to suit up and show up. Pat would say to me, Heather, if having a good attitude were a prerequisite for being sober, we would all be drunk. She goes, you don't have to do it happily and you don't have to do it willingly. She said, but you most assuredly have to do it. And so I continued to be of service. And my children and I went to LA to see my husband, who was working on a project. And before I left town, I went to Dino and I said, Dino, I'm leaving for a week. I'll be back. And I brought him his favorite milkshake. And my mom is a nurse and she was retired. She said she would take care of him. He was in a nursing home by then. And I get to LA and the phone rings and it's my mother. And my mother said, Heather, it's starting. And I'm like, what do you mean it's starting? She said, he's dying. She said, I think he waited for you to leave before he would die. And he'd been in a coma for about 2 days. And she said, I'm going to put the phone to his ear. You need to tell him to go. And she put the phone to his ear. And I said, Dino, I said, I love you and you need to let go. And my mom said, Heather, his eyes are open. And he said the words on the phone, I love you too. And again, if you had said to me, Heather, why are you doing this? I would have parroted back what I said twice already, because AA told me to suit up and show up, and because I wanted my husband to have a sense of peace. But what happened was I loved this man more than I was loved, and I understood him more than I was understood. And I forgave him more than I was forgiven. And because I self-forgot, as it says, because I did something that I believed would have no effect on me, I was forever changed. And I can tell you that when he died, all that animus and hatred and loathing that I felt for him was released, because in the service of somebody else, I find peace. And so when I went to sprinkle his ashes out in the Smoky Mountains, I said, you can go and be at peace. And I believe that that is where he is today. You guys gave me that, and I cannot thank you enough. And shortly after Dino passed away, I began to get sick, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And my doctor sent me to all the specialists in Knoxville, and then he sent me to specialists in Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville. And I'm starting to get scared because I'm getting sicker and sicker by the month. And my prayers in my meditation time in the 11th step, what I would do is I do 3 and 7, and then I do a particular reading that a lot of AAs do. It's not AA approved, but it works for me. And then I do my prayer, which I believe is a petitioning to God, and then meditation. And I do various meditations, which is sometimes I look at a fire or a flame. Sometimes I do a guided meditation. Other times I just do deep breathing. But I'm plugged into God, you guys. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. I'm going to meetings. I'm in the center of AA. I sponsor 12 and a half women. And if you don't know what the half is, honey, you're the half. Somebody tell you. Somebody will tell you that's, and I'm doing what I'm asked. But my prayers become, God, help me to learn the lesson you would have me learn from this illness. And then it became, God, help me to use this to help another drunk. And then my prayers became, God, make it stop. And then unbeknownst to me, my prayer became, God, I hate you. And I became detached from my higher power. I was no longer on the shore of faith, but back on the bridge of reason. And let me tell you something, newcomer, old timer, it does not matter. If you got a lot of time in AA, and the old timers will tell you, and you're detached from a higher power and you're scared, that is a dangerous place for a long time sober alcoholic to be. And I'm sitting in my doctor's office and my husband's sitting in the chair behind me, and my doctor and I are eye to eye with each other in the center of the room. And he says, Heather, some of what's wrong with you, we understand, but other parts we don't. So I'm going to send you to the Cleveland Clinic. And he says, and the drugs they want to give you right now are dangerous for somebody like you. And he knows I'm sober and how important my program is. And my husband's sitting behind me and he goes, it doesn't matter. She won't take the drugs. And he goes, you won't? I go, no, we're in the middle of a diagnosis and I can endure the pain and discomfort right now. I understand that I'm on a journey. Let me be clear if you're new, there's a pamphlet for everything in AA. There's a pamphlet on medication. That's an outside issue we have no opinion on, and it's between you, your God, and your sponsor. And there is no judgment from me. You do you, boo. I'm just saying, for me, I've chosen not to take the medication right now. That would be a class 3 narcotic for painkillers. So we are driving home, you guys, and I live in the deep woods. And when I say deep woods, like I literally have driven down my road and there's a turkey standing in the middle of the road looking at me like, come at me, bro. And I get home and I'm on my back patio and I call my sponsor, Pat, and I'm hysterical. I'm yelling at my sponsor. I've never yelled at my sponsor before. I said, Pat, I don't want to drink and I don't want to use and I don't want to kill myself, but I don't know how I'm going to do this. And if you've ever heard Pat Yost speak, she has this, I would say, buttery, dulcet toned voice. She's so chill. And she's on the other end and she goes, you know, I was speaking at a conference up in Washington State with Georgia B. You know Georgia B, don't you? And she's really calm and I'm flipping out and I'm talking at her now through my teeth. And I'm like, yes, Pat, I know who Georgia B is. We were in the same home group. And she's like, oh, right. Yes. She said, I think you should give her a call. And I think, did she hear what I said? I don't want to drink and I don't want to use and I don't want to kill myself, but I don't know how I'm going to do this. But what came out was, okay, I'll call her. Because I've been trained in AA to have smart feet, to be willing to take an action that I don't believe will have an effect on me, and yet it does every single time. So the next day, I called Georgia B, and just like that, my perspective changed. A day at a time, a moment at a time, she walked me through this chronic illness that I'm dealing with, and she gave me strength and hope. If you're new, I can tell you that we never go through anything alone, ever. There is somebody somewhere in Alcoholics Anonymous that has experienced strength and hope to share. And right around that time, Pat says, my God, Heather, you are so self-absorbed. She goes, you're consumed with this illness. All you do is go to doctors right now. And I understand that, but you have got to start serving again. She said, are you speaking? I said, I canceled all my dates. She said, you need to start saying yes. And because God does not play, my friend, 2 weeks late, a week later, this woman calls me and says, hey, my speaker canceled in Dallas. Can you come? So 2 weeks after that, I'm at a podium at a strip mall in Dallas for the 30th anniversary of this little group, and I'm giving my talk, and I'm all over the place. I'm a hot mess. And right in the middle of my talk, this guy's face pops into my head. And I don't know if you've ever had somebody in a meeting that's more of an acquaintance. You don't really hang out with them, but every time he or she shares, you're like, oh my God, that stuff is so good. This was that guy. He popped into my head and I got back on track and I finished my talk and I'm in my hotel room that night, you guys. And I'm looking up on Facebook and I don't see anything about this guy. And I think, oh, that's weird. And it's Monday morning and I'm back in Knoxville and I'm in my driveway and I'm about to go to my house of worship, Walmart. And no, don't judge. I'm just saying, I told my husband when I die, I want to be cremated and I want my ashes sprinkled over a Walmart super center. He's like, babe, I'll go you one better. He says, I'll put happy low price leader signs at either end of your coffin. We just celebrated 28 years of marriage. And every year I say, babe, can you believe it's been 28 years? And he's like, hun, it feels like 28 minutes. And I'm like, oh, thank you. And he goes, underwater. So I'm sitting in my driveway and I get this weird feeling about that guy again. And I thought, okay, I'm done. I'm going to private message this guy on Facebook. And you guys, this is going to sound hooey gooey, but it's in fact the truth. I send him a message and say, man, I don't know if there's something going on with you, but you've been on my mind. And if you want to talk, here's my number. He's got 2 more years of sobriety than me. And I said, if everything is cool, just disregard this as the rantings of a postmenopausal woman and have a lovely day. And I push send. And I got into the parking lot at Walmart, which is like 5 minutes from my house, and my phone is ringing. And it's this guy. And let me tell you what he looks like. He's 6'6". He's got a shaved head, goatee, biker leathers. He looks like he'd stab you in the neck with a rusty screwdriver if you crossed him. You know, he's not warm and fuzzy. And he's on the other end of the phone and he is cussing me out. He's like, how the blank do you know what's going on? Are you reading my mail? And he's screaming at me. And I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute. I said, are you okay? He said, I'm in trouble. And I said, did you drink? And there was long silence. And he said, I don't want to drink and I don't want to use and I don't want to kill myself, but I don't know how I'm going to do this. And you know how in AA we have hindsight? Those were my prayers. And I realized, oh my God, this is in real time. This is what this has been about. And I said, I get it. And he began to tell me how he had let money, property, and prestige and women and everything separate him from God. And he didn't even notice it, just like me. Just like my alcoholism, just like that frog in the pot of water boiling alive in his juices. I was dying of the disease of separation from God, and so was he. And we were in the center of AA doing it. And how were we going to find our way back? And I said to him, have I ever told you the story about this lady down the road from me? And he said, I don't think so. I'm going to tell you guys, I live in a holler and I had to go through some switchbacks to get up to a main road. I told him, I said, I'm driving my kid home with another kid from a birthday party. I said, I go down this switchback and I look over and there's a woman laying in the yard and there's a car up on a mound of dirt. It's totaled. And I said to him, I pull in the driveway and I jump out of my car and I run over to her. And I said, she pops up like she's on a spring. You guys, she had a gash in her forehead and she had bandages all over and she was staggering. She was drunk and high. She looked like a torn up alley cat, I told him. She was one of us. And I said, oh my God, let me call you an ambulance. And she said, no, I live here. And I looked at her car. It was totaled. I knew she wasn't going anywhere. I had my kid in the front seat. He grew up around you guys. He was like, whatever. The kid in the back seat was like, I thought, I got to get this kid out of here. I don't want his mom thinking I'm bringing him around some craziness. So I tell this guy on the phone, I said, I think about this woman every day. I drive by her house every day. I said to him, I said, if I see her, I'm going to stop and see if she wants to go have a cup of coffee or if she'd like to go to a meeting with me. And I told him, I never saw her again from that day until this day I'm about to tell you about. And he said, and what was this day? I said, it was early in the morning. And I said, there was a thick fog on the holler. And I said, it was like pea soup. I was driving at a snail's pace through the switchback. And I said, I looked over in her yard and she was in the yard and she was laying completely nude. I said her head was tilted sideways and I'll never forget, you guys. She had these crystal blue eyes and they were looking at the road and she had the strawberry blonde hair and it was flailed out and her arm was folded over her bosom so you couldn't see it. And her leg was flopped over slightly so you couldn't see her private parts. And I told him, I said, I went up to her and she was dead. I said, she looked like a Botticelli painting. She looked so peaceful. I said, sweetie, you got to ask yourself what series of events had to occur for me to be the woman that found her in that car accident, to be the woman that found her dead, to be sitting in a parking lot talking to you about God. I couldn't have arranged that if I tried. And so this guy and I shifted our gaze ever so slightly. He sold his houses in Knoxville and a couple of his motorcycles, and he's back in his home state seeking God. We speak frequently. And I had to readjust my gaze and find a God that would work for me, you know. But that's not the end of that. I thought about this woman constantly. I thought about her family, and I kept asking Pat, my sponsor, can I go to the house and talk to the family? I said, I think other family members moved in. I never saw a for sale sign, and the house is all clean now, and the yard is kept, and there's toys in the yard, and there's dogs behind the fence. I think some family members moved in. And Pat said, no, it's not yours to do. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And so not too long after that, I'm at a football game in Jacksonville, Florida, and we're in the hotel room. My husband had just called an Uber and I'm scrolling on Facebook yet again. And I see this message and I click on it and it says, my name is Ashley. She said, I heard the 911 call and I read the police report, and I believe that you're the woman that found my mother. And if you would talk to me, I would appreciate it. And I turned to my husband. I said, cancel the Uber, book it for 30 minutes from now. And I pick up the phone and I call this young girl. And I said, hello, Ashley. My name is Heather. And I went to say my last name and she started screaming hysterically. And I said, take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. And I began to tell her the story that I've just shared with you, that I was the woman that found her in the car accident and that I was the woman that found her dead. And she said, Heather, I need to tell you a story that's going to sound kind of crazy. She said, my whole family lives on this road. She said, my two brothers live up the road from mom's house, and myself and my cousin live down the road. And she said, my brothers left really early in the morning at 4 for a construction job, and it was dark and they couldn't see her. And she says, and my cousin went to work. And then my son was sick and I kept calling the house and she didn't answer and she didn't answer. She said, my family believes that you were meant to find her. And I said, sweetie, I said, being with your mother and finding her was the most horrifically precious moment of my life. I said, and no matter where I am in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous or with a friend, I will speak about who she was and what it meant to me. And it helped to save my life and the life of a friend of mine. Thank you. And so this is my life now. I go to doctor's appointments and I try to redirect my energy, and I speak when I'm asked in AA. Remember that woman, Franny S., that I told you about? For over 33 years, every now and again, I would pray to God to see her. I was speaking at a meeting out in Palm Springs, and my host was sitting next to me. I was going to be the Saturday night speaker, and they were doing the sober countdown. And my sponsor was there with a friend of hers, and they were old farts. They're 47 and 50 years old. And as they get to the last person, the lady at the podium says, and is there anybody over the age of 50? And I hear a commotion in the back room. And I see women helping this woman up out of a wheelchair. And this little frail hand comes up and she said, my name is Franny S. And I am 55 years sober. And I gasped out loud. And my hostess said, what's wrong? And I said, nothing, I'm okay. And so now I have to get up and give a talk. And I'm boogery crying already as I get up to the podium. And I said, before I get into my talk, Franny, I want to tell you something. And I told her the story about her speaking in a day of desperation when I was seeking God. And I said, I've thought about you every day for 33 plus years, and I want to thank you for saving my life. And I can tell you, if you're new, that was a prayer I prayed off and on for 33 years. What the 11th step has taught me is this, is that I have to be patient and take actions in service of others. And God is miraculous, but I must be present to see the miracles. And I won't get to see the miracles if I'm not doing the work. It was the most amazing moment of my life that I got to go up after I spoke and say, thank you in a dark day for carrying a message that had depth and weight. So if you're new, I've spoken a lot about God and God shots and kind of miraculous moments. And I know it's crazy, but they go on all the time in our lives. And what we have to do is take the blinders off, lift the veil off of our face. The 12 and 12 talks about the atheist that knows God does not exist and the agnostic who doubts the existence of God. I was the one in the 12 and 12 that knew God existed, but found him wanting, because where was God when all those horrible things were happening to me? Newcomer, let me tell you where God was. God was in the hotel room that day. I had that internal voice that told me to get up. God was with me in the day in that doctor's office, the day I got that bad news. And God was with me right now. And I made choices and decisions when I drank and did drugs. God had nothing to do with that. And you know what I know today is what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous, is we push into the center of AA, whether you do or did not get the guy or girl that you wanted, or the job that you wanted, or whether or not your candidate does or does not win. What we do is push into the center of AA. We seek God and we serve others. I want to thank you for my life.
Your hand up. Come on in.
Most of the people in my life love to unmute. I mean, love to mute me. So that's not new. Uh, I'm the Bill Deshaun Johnson Senior. I'm an alcoholic. And good morning, good afternoon to anybody, wherever you are. Heather, you wrong. You dead wrong. I got to drive tonight, and I can't see because you got me crying. The question I have for you is, first of all, thank you, thank you, thank you. Secondly, I'm on I-75 coming out of Michigan. I'm headed to Atlanta, Georgia. I'm stopping and knock at the Petro in Knoxville to fill up tomorrow morning, but I will meet you at Walmart just to say hi if possible. That's my only question. If you want to, look, I praise them at Walmart too. So my number's on there. So if you would please, I love me. I had a chance to meet Alice and Akron. So please, my number's right there. Shoot me a text, call me, so I can come and see you. And just the question is, you talked about it a little bit. How do you continuously stay connected now with the experiences that you're dealing with?
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so here's the weird deal, and I'll try to be brief. So I go to that conference and I see that woman that's so impactful in my sobriety, and I thought that was the God shot. And what had happened was this chick that's my AA sister, who's a hairdresser who never goes to conferences because she works on the weekends, was there. She said, I came to see you. And we're having coffee, and she's you ever seen somebody that has a home-based business and they want to sell you something? That's how she's talking to me. She's talking about this thing called two-way prayer, and she's on fire for it, and it's the thing, and two-way prayer. And I'm like, oh, I'm so happy for you. Oh my God, stop talking about it. And I get back to Knoxville, and I'm sitting there in my prayer and meditation, in that quiet moment that God conscience said two-way prayer. And I had my iPad on my lap, and I threw it on the couch, and I go, I'm not doing it. Like a child, I go, I'm not doing it, God. I can't handle one more thing. And as I said, I'm not doing it, I got up and got a binder, one of those student binders. And I go, I don't even know how to do it. And that God conscious said, look it up online. And I found a video, and I began two-way prayer. And what two-way prayer does is it constantly asks me to ask questions and evolve. And so I can see God in you for sure, but sometimes I have difficulty seeing God in me. And the two-way prayer asks me to look at God through me, if that makes sense. And two-way prayer is not for everybody. And I'll tell you another story about it. I got pissed off about 3 weeks ago, and I told God I'm not doing it. And I was miserable for a couple of weeks. Spiritually constipated would be the word I would use. And but it works for me. And that is how, in answer to your question, that is how I stay present. You know, because God answers for me are yes, no, and not right now. And it's in the not right now that he grows us, right? Yeah. Thank you for your question. And I'm going to find your number. We'll do coffee, baby.
Hi, I'm Allison. I'm an alcoholic. Heather, thank you so much. I got to hear you at PG and Chill a couple months ago and just loved it. And we have a lot in common. I got sober. I worked on the Santa Monica Pier in the 80s, and I was drinking down at the Santa Monica Pier in Venice. So I'm aligned with that. Got sober in 92. I know your sponsor. She crocheted a baby blanket for my son when he was born in 2003. But anyways, I love your story. I love how you share your message, and thank you for that. Can you talk about, have you had the same experience with people you sponsor, having this difficulty in developing this relationship with a power greater than themselves who are obstinate around that? And can you share any experiences about how you help them with that?
Yeah, I mean, I actually have a couple of women that are in a black hole right now with their spiritual journey, for lack of a better word. And when they balk at it, I share stories, anecdotal stories, like some of what I've talked about today. But like what I say to them is that faith is not easy. It's an expectation of the unseen, and it asks you to stretch a muscle. And I say to this one girl, I said, you love to work out, girl. I said, this is a workout. And so sometimes your higher power, Mother Earth, whatever you want to call it, Buddha, Allah, whatever your deal is, you've got to figure that out. And then you've got to make sure that it's bigger than you. God of year 1 does not fit God of year 34. I have outgrown my God a couple of times and had to reboot, as I've told you. And so what I say to them is, they have several of them and said, why don't I just use you as my higher power? And I go, I'm a dumpster fire going downhill at a fast clip on a good day. That's with a program and a sponsor and working the steps. That would be a bad idea. The group is not a great idea either, in my opinion. But what I do say to them is that we do these prayers, and if you lean into it just enough, stretch that muscle, you're going to have an experience. I love Sunny's reading of the spiritual experience, because they have, and I have to remind them, you have had educational variety spiritual experiences. And so we revisit those. And then I say with them, I will be with you. I will have my hand on your back the whole time, and you will find something bigger than you. I said, I've yet to see it fail. I don't know if that helps, but that's my experience with that.
Thank you. Before Andrew comes in, I want to invite anybody within the sound of our voice that's here live to put your hand up if you've struggled with your attachment, if you are no longer in the center, if you struggle with chronic pain, if you're facing a health opportunity. Please take advantage of this opportunity. Andrew, please.
How do I lower my hand? Oh,
There you go.
recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body and a hopeless attitude towards life, towards God, towards the moment. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Heather. And thank you, Ali and team, for providing this Step 11 platform. My question is, you powered in very quickly, just do what self doesn't want me to do. Go to a meeting, answer that call when I don't, the opposite. And I've been hearing that a lot. But your talk was about feeling, after all this time, feeling a loss of the closeness to this power, which I just call God. I want to ask you, how pertinent is the idea that the writers of the Big Book used on page 60 or 62, where they talk about our alcoholic is like the actor on the stage. Can you tell me anything, your feelings about why that story was chosen?
Wow, God, this is Stump the Speaker, isn't it? Holy smokes. Well, I can only speak for myself in my interpretation of that page. And that is that I am a willful, self-centered, self-serving, self-seeking individual. And as relates to the 11th step, if I'm not in action, that's my opinion, that God is action. And that more often than not, I want God to yield to my will. And Pat always says to me, Heather, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And I said, well, hell, Pat, I want both of them. And she says, you don't get both. And since I have a state of reasonableness because I've been surrendered by alcohol, I'm probably more inclined not to want to be that person anymore. Do I do it? Yes. As my husband likes to say, oh my gosh, I forgot our focus. Oh yes, it's you. And I said, if you would just stay on message, it would make our life so much easier. I mean, it's funny because it's true, isn't it? I really want everybody just to do it my way. I really want what I want. And yet, I don't know if this is going to make sense. Have you ever actually annoyed yourself? I have been doing stuff and thinking, Heather, stop it. Heather, shut your mouth, restrain a pen and tongue. Heather, stop doing it. And I've actually gone into another room and gone, oh my God, I am irritating myself. The self of the alcoholic is like no other I've ever seen. I can justify thoughts, behaviors, and actions, and I am good. That's how I lived out there running my game. The problem is that tool set doesn't work in sobriety. I don't know if I kind of honed in on that, but yeah, man, wow, Stump the Speaker, you are good. Thank you, Andrew.
What a great answer, Heather. Thank you. My
Thank you.
brother Nash, please come in.
Hi, Heather. My name is Nash, alcoholic. My question may be a little bit vague, but I was just wondering if there's one area of your recovery that you can say has been the most important to follow through with. And I heard you say, just do what's asked of you. Obviously we're praying, we're meditating and doing all those things and trying to stay in service. But if there is one aspect of your recovery that has been the most important to you, that's my question.
Thank you. That's a good question. On any given day, it would be a different answer, but the overall reaching is sitting across from another drunk that's new and working with them, because nothing reminds me who I am. There's this woman that texted me just before the meeting, and she has been in the hospital 5 times and she's actively dying, and she thinks she's different than us. And she had pancreatitis so bad that they said if she drank one more time, she would die. And she drank, and she texted me just before I got on the meeting and said, I'm home, I'm sober, I should have called you first. Do I think she's going to make it? I'm not God, I don't know. But I can tell you that the odds are not in her favor, but I will do anything I can. I will be inconvenienced. I will do whatever. It's not my nature. I am centered in self. So nothing shows me more about the program than sitting across from a newcomer and working with them.
Beautiful, beautiful answer. Trina, it's awfully dark there, but I see your camera's on. Would you please come in?
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, I can't even get to a light right now.
Okay.
My name's Trina. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Heather. Thanks for your share today. That was just what I needed. It's ironic how Creator works, because thought I was going on a different meeting, so I needed to hear what I needed to hear. But I too suffer from a very debilitating chronic illness, and so you went through that yourself. And how do you balance that and being able to still sponsor people? I'm struggling with that myself, and I've had to let some people go because I don't know how I'm going to feel from day to day, but I'm still involved in service and I still want to participate. So how do you manage that?
And I'm so sorry to hear about your illness. And I will tell you, everybody's journey is different with a chronic illness. And I will tell you that there are days where my girls know that if they want to see me, they have to come to the house. I'm on the couch and I can't move. I have things like costochondritis, which is inflammation around the ribs. So just breathing hurts right now. And so some days I find that I cannot even get my butt into gear. And so the phone is a great tool. Zoom is a great tool. And the minute I get off the phone with somebody, I feel immediately physically better. It's crazy. It's almost like salve on a wound. Our disease centers in our mind. And if I'm self-absorbed or if I'm in my other illness, I have to be reminded, oh yes, there's another illness that's going to kill me, and that's my alcoholism. And when I talk to you, I feel better. It just works. I got to tell you this, honey. I'm secretly, I say this and one of my friends cringes, but I'm just going to be honest with you. You're my family. I always want AA to be the last answer, and it's always the first answer. It always feels me. It always is the solution. It always is the thing. My family doesn't realize it, but AA is up here and they're right here. It's a balancing act. AA comes first, always, because it is the solution. It only gave me everything. I wish you well on your journey, honey.
Alice, you gotta mute yourself.
Nikki, I'm sorry. Nikki, come on in.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nikki, alcoholic. Thank you so much for this meeting. Heather, that was an amazing share. I wasn't going to speak up tonight. Alice, your You inspired me, because I'm not in the middle right now. I need to be, I'm getting closer. I was really struggling last night and reached out to my sponsor, um, to let her know, because I've just been self-absorbed. And sometimes I'm like, but I'm newly homeschooling my child, and I'm working full time, and I'm doing all these things, and I'm doing good things. So it's okay that I'm all about self. And it's like, no, I'm not. Like, it's not okay. And just hearing you tonight share your story and share that you're, in the hospital and your sponsor is telling you you need to be of service. Or I don't know if it was when you're at your doctor's office or specifically in the hospital, but I was like, oh my gosh, like that is my answer. Like, I heard God speak through you. My sponsor tells me all the things, and sometimes I take some of them and sometimes I don't. But that is absolutely what I need to do, is be back in service and not be so about myself. So thank you so much. And I'll ask you a quick question. Like, when you start to feel that, like, if you start to feel that disconnect ever, or you start to get like too wrapped up in your own life and your own issues, is it your sponsor that kind of gets you back on track? Is it God? Or do you kind of go, oh crap, like I'm way too in self, like I need to reach out to someone? So that's my question. Thank you again.
Thank you. And I'm glad we call it turning ourselves in. That's what I do. I turn myself into God, to my sponsor, to my friends. And I want to say this to you, because you're a busy mom with a little kid and you're homeschooling. God is actually portable. He goes with, and I forget that sometimes. Like when I'm in the car, when I'm driving, I can pull over, I can take 2 minutes. He doesn't make too hard terms for us, does he? So yes, I turn myself into everybody. I'm like the town crier. I'm an idiot. Somebody help me, please. That's literally what I do. And they all laugh and they're like, come on, you know.
Heather, thank you for a beautiful, beautiful evening. Nikki, thank you for turning yourself in. I want to give it back to Michelle, and I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. For all the people who had the courage to put their hands up, thank you for deepening the quality of our meeting. Heather, thank you.